Hello everybody. To many, the idea of an extreme, hardcore Bentley sounds like an oxymoron, and today I'm driving what the company called its most extreme road car of the 21st century, the limited edition and rather wonderful, but oft-forgotten Continental GT3-R. And here you have a vehicle which is simultaneously trying to appeal to your 911 GT3 buyer, but without sacrificing the luxury and opulence that has made Bentley famous. And in this video, I'm going to be discussing whether the GT3-R really is as silly as it seems on paper, or whether this might just be one of the best kept secrets in the motoring world. The GT3-R is a member of the second generation of the Continental GT family, which was introduced in 2011. Though, to call it a second generation does feel like a little bit of a stretch, because by anybody else's metrics, you probably just call this a facelift. The chassis is fundamentally the same as the first gen car, however, it did bring with it a number of notable changes. First off was an upgrade in the gearbox from a 6-speed ZF to an 8-speed. The engine lineup was also expanded. The W12, which was the sole offering for the first gen car, was joined by an Audi-derived 4-litre twin-turbocharged V8. Though both inside and out it is clear to see that the car is an evolution of that which came before, I'd say it's a very effective one, because to my eyes, the second generation Continental GT is a fabulous looking thing, and where the first is a car that I'd really refuse to own on looks alone, the second is much more appealing. The GT3-R landed in 2014. It originally began as something of a skunkworks project and was designed really to pay tribute to the GT3 race car, which had been competing for a few years prior. And the ingredients list for the GT3-R reads like a road racer how-to guide. You've got lower, stiffer, more aggressive dampers, anti-roll bar, and even suspension bushings, which in some cases were up to 75% more rigid than the originals. The basis for the GT3-R is actually the Continental GT V8S, and the V8 was chosen simply because it carries less weight, in particular over the front axle. This makes some 50 horsepower more than that car for a total of 578 PS, and that came chiefly courtesy of a new turbocharger which was also blueprinted, in other words made to even tighter than usual tolerances. This had the benefit of not only, allegedly, improving the spool up time and response, but also giving you that little bit extra power. As with the regular Continental, the GT3-R features a permanent all-wheel drive system, which by default sends 40% of torque to the front and 60% to the rear, though in times of need it can also send up to 65% forwards or 85% rearwards. The 8-speed gearbox was also retuned, and a newer and considerably shorter final drive was also fitted, making this the fastest accelerating Bentley of the time, 0 to 60 in just 3.7 seconds. However, this allegedly came at the cost of top speed, which previously had been about 192, but here was just 170. Regardless, making sure you could stop from whatever speed it was that you achieved, the car was fitted with the largest brakes seen on a production car at the time. 420mm carbon silicide items at the front and slightly smaller carbon ones at the rear. These are clamped by gorgeous green calipers, and I have to say they are very, very impressive. The GT3-R also saw the introduction of torque vectoring for the first time, though torque vectoring does seem like a little bit of a misnomer. What they actually mean is that when the situation requires, the car will brake an inside rear wheel to get you around a corner even quicker. You even have a standard fit titanium Akrapovic exhaust, which saves 7 kilos. And of course, what luxury car is complete without a matching timepiece? Here, the GT3-R does not disappoint, being supplied with a bespoke Breitling made of carbon fibre and titanium. Limited to just 300 pieces to match the car, not all of them are still with their original partner, but happily this one is. Inside, the rear seats were ditched and extensive carbon fibre introduced to try and get the weight down. Overall, some 100 kilos was shaved out of the car, but still, it's a pretty big old bus, and depending on who you ask, it weighs between 2.1 and 2.3 tons. or to put it another way, it is a small car heavier than just about anything else that's allegedly this track focused. And Bentley themselves would tell you that during the development process, the only other cars they benchmarked were other Bentleys, because that was all they really cared about. And I think Bentley were wise to not even try, because if lap times is your thing, I'm reasonably confident that as good as it may be, this car never had a hope in hell of coming close to something like a 911 GT3 or a Ferrari 458 Speciale. And those are cars worth mentioning, because if you could have afforded one of these, you could certainly have afforded one of those. You see, the GT3-R when new was also one of the most expensive Bentleys to date, at £237,000. The vast majority of them were, as you see it here, with white optional graphics and inside a carbon fibre black and green leather interior. The overall effect is absolutely wondrous, and you can tell a lot about this car by the things that they didn't change. So this car does still have double glazing, it does still have dual zone climate control, it does still have electrically adjustable seats, an electrically adjustable steering column. It's a smooth, comfortable thing. The majority of the suspension, retuned though it may be, is still the same air ride setup as it is in a regular V8S. And one of the real shocks about this car is just how supremely comfortable it is to do this sort of normal stuff. It really is still what you'd expect of a Bentley. In fact, maybe embarrassingly for the company, I think this, the most hardcore car the company had ever built, is actually a far more pleasant thing to drive than any of the current generation of Continental GT or even Flying Spur. Those are cars which here are simply just not that pleasant. But you see, this is no normal Continental GT. It's the GT3-R, so while it's very admirable that it can do the normal waft about stuff, what's of even greater importance is, can it put a smile on your face when you want to have fun? Let's find out. This thing is an absolute riot, and I take great pleasure in saying this is by far and away my favourite Bentley. Full stop, no asterisk, no PS, no brackets, nothing. This is sensational. It is absolutely everything that a Bentley should be. I know they've made technically faster and more powerful variants. This didn't even have the same poke as the regular W12 Speed or whatever it was of the time, and they even made a 710 horsepower W12 Super Sports, but that was nowhere near as hardcore as this, and honestly, this has more than enough go. Seriously, 2.1 tons it may be, but slow it is not. This thing is sensational.
Confession time, the reason this one goes quite so well is that it's not entirely standard. Rather than the usual 570 horsepower, it now makes around 700, all courtesy of just a map and an uprated air filter. The other modification is a lowering achieved through different suspension links, but even that the car has taken in its stride. Had you not told me, I never would have known.
Of course, I now have the gearbox in manual mode, and though it doesn't have the bite or response of even a modern 8-speed ZF, and certainly not a dual clutch, it's still more than interactive enough to be worth putting in manual mode. The engine too is very, very tractable, makes a great noise too, and those cracks and pops are surprisingly loud. They also don't feel all that forced, and I am told by Denis that this engine is not anywhere near as close to the Audi unit of the time that many people expect. It really is a Bentley thing. The steering, I suppose you could call something of a weakness. You've got a little bit of feel, feedback, texture and weighting to it, but it just doesn't respond in the way that a true lightweight sports car would. But that's fine. This is a Bentley, it's still got a sense of heft about it, which is quite important, and you do know what the car is doing. It has a sensational balance to it, and grip is absolutely staggering. Put your foot down and this thing will fire itself down the road. Equally as impressive, I would say, is the fuel consumption. One of the benefits of the V8 of this era is it comes with cylinder deactivation and was at all times considerably more frugal than the W12. Though I'm sure you imagine that anybody with a big Bentley that costs £250,000 doesn't care about fuel economy, having to stop to fill up frequently is an annoyance for everybody. And this, even with me having fun, is still recording 21.3 as an average. And on the way up here, Dennis told me that he was achieving over 30 to the gallon. As an average, when he got to me, the car was recording 25, and that is seriously good. Visibility is not even as bad as you might think. This is actually my first time driving a second generation Continental GT, so I can't really compare it too much with the regular variant, but I can tell you that forwards is pretty decent, to the side also excellent, partly thanks to the fact this is actually a pillarless coupe. I do love that. Out the rear is decent too, and you get a good view of that lovely carbon weave which meets in the middle absolutely perfectly. This interior is really quite special, and I do really appreciate the fact that Bentley were dedicated to keeping this car feeling like a luxury item. So having the double glazing still, this beautiful switchgear, it all does add up to making a car that feels distinctly different to your average 911 GT3, or to be honest, top of the line 911 Turbo. Those cannot hold a candle to the sense of occasion and opulence you get in this. Seeing these strips of green leather adjacent to carbon fibre could easily go wrong, but in this, somehow, they've managed to pull it off. This car is the perfect balance of boy racer and lord of the manor. If I were to criticise anything, it's that exhaust, though it makes a great noise under load, is perhaps a little bit too eager with its cracks and pops. The loss of the back seats may also be a deal breaker for some, because, to many, the USP of the Continental GT, along with things like the Maserati Gran Turismo, is that it was a gorgeous coupe that also had 4 genuinely usable chairs, and it's not a 2+2. However, you've still got a nice loading bay back there, so if it's just the two of you going away, this is a fabulous thing. That parcel shelf alone gives you more storage space than most pure sports cars I care to mention, and the boot is still present and correct, and massive. The lid of which is composite, and that is specific to the GT3-R. I'm sure you also haven't failed to notice the aero addenda on the car, the wing at the back, the more aggressive lip at the front, though the additions really are fairly subtle. Impossible to miss, granted, but again, I think they do a good job of showing you this is a more sporting, more focused car without ruining the elegance of the shape. Having now driven it, in many ways I suppose Bentley were actually correct to say that the only real thing you can compare this car with is another Bentley. In terms of, say, a Rolls-Royce, the only thing even remotely close would be a Wraith, but that is a very different car. Feels 3 sizes bigger than this, and though a lot more fun to drive than it has any right to be, just isn't anywhere near as sporting. The Maserati Gran Turismo then is nowhere near as opulent or luxurious as this, and actually quite a bit slower too, I'd say. Truthfully, the last car I drove that was close to this was the old Super Sports, and that was the convertible version, which again, on paper, just didn't work, because the Super Sports was a lightweight, stripped out, more hardcore version of the Continental GT, but the convertible was then heavier, less stiff, and therefore less capable, yet somehow it just worked, particularly on road, and this is like that. You'd think that maybe to get it to go around a bend they'd have stiffened it up so much that it would just be unenjoyable, like many a modern Bentley, but no. It's still good fun on the road, it's still right. I haven't got it in its stiffest setting, I've got it in Sport 1, there's one more setting beyond that, and it just works. This, to me, in one car, is absolutely everything that a Bentley should be. Opulence, performance, rarity. They made just 300 of these, with only about 30 for the home market, and today just about 28, I think, remaining. And yet somehow, they're still good value. I was genuinely expecting this car, having cost 240 grand new, to be still about 240 grand. It's a rare, lightweight, special edition version of an excellent car. But no, they're not. You want to pick up one of these now, it's 130 grand. which means not only is it one of the best Bentleys out there, I think this could be the ultimate performance motoring bargain. And that I did not expect to say. If you were to give me the choice of this or my F12 for a trip around Europe, it would be the Bentley every single time. For that hit of adrenaline on a summer's day, I'd have the Ferrari. But more of the time, more year round, this is more car, more fun. I love it. Anyway, a huge thank you to Dennis for bringing this car out, and as ever to you for watching. Don't forget to hit the like button, comment down below, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you for the next one. Bye bye.